Okay. Good afternoon. Welcome everybody, and I'm very happy to be here at the Buddhist English Library of Seoul, together with Venerable Chang'asanim and the staff here, who have worked very hard to organize this series of talks. And as was just mentioned, today I will be talking about the roots of Korean Zen, or otherwise you know as a Zen, the roots of Korean Zen. And this is of particular interest to me and to many people nowadays. What is the roots and the beginning of Korean Zen? Those of you who have lived in Korea for some time, especially Korean people, are more familiar with the history of Korean Buddhism than others, but I'm not really going to go through the history of Korean Buddhism, because when we look at the history, a lot of what we know as Buddhism is a cultural manifestation. And what I'm really interested in is the search for the truth. Search for the true nature, for the true self. And this has always been there, but sometimes it's obscured by the cultural manifestation, because the cultural manifestation of Buddhism can, even though it's sometimes very beautiful and sometimes very interesting, is sometimes obscuring the truth. And many times when we try to find out what is the teachings of the true teaching of the Buddha and the true teaching of our the way to find our true self, it's hard to find because there's so many cultural manifestations. And the cultural manifestations are all wonderful, but that's sometimes like we have to look past all the leaves of the tree to get to the root of the tree. The tree has many branches and many leaves, but what's the root? What's the fundamental part of the tree that nourishes the tree? Because without the root, the tree is not nourished. And so I'd like to talk about the roots of this Korean Zen. As many of you may already know, there is something that distinguishes the Korean Buddhism from the Buddhism of, let's say, the Buddhism of other Asian countries, in particular, let's say the Buddhism of Malaysia, or the Buddhism of Thailand, the Buddhism of Japan. Many countries have Buddhism in Asia. What is it that distinguishes Korean Buddhism? Can anybody say? Okay, we can say actually the unbroken Sun lineage, Sun line, the lineage. We say in English lineage. In Korean you say like a Sun mek, okay? The lineage means that from one person to another, from one venerable monk to another, the Dharma was passed on. The Dharma teaching was passed on in a certain form. So in our Buddhist tradition, we have not only the Zen teaching being passed on, we also have, in some cases, we also have the Buddhist precepts being passed on. So for example, if you want to become a precepts master in Korea, you need to study first with the older master of the precepts and get the teaching from him. And then the line of transmission is passed on. And so this is a unique in the Korean Buddhism, actually. I don't want to say completely unique, but it's one of the qualities that we find that's difficult to find in other countries' Buddhist tradition. For example, in Japanese Zen, because Japanese Zen is more family-oriented, the Buddhist teaching is sometimes passed on from father to son. And the temple is passed on from father to son because the Buddhist tradition is family-oriented. And there is no prohibition against having family in the temple, being married and have family in the temple. However, in the Korean tradition, this is not the case. In most schools in Korea, some schools that is the case, but in the Chogi school, there is not family tradition, but there is the tradition. There's like some kind of sort of a temple tradition, and so we have the roots of Korean Zen. We can say began where? Where did they begin? What's the most important sutra in the Chogi order? Can anybody tell me? Diamond Sutra, correct. Diamond Sutra is the most important. It's called the diamond cutter, the cutter of doubts. What is a diamond? It's the hardest substance known to man. It's used to cut other metals, to cut other stones. So the Diamond Sutra is considered to be the sutra that cut all the doubts, that cut all the mistaken notions, and so the Diamond Sutra is considered the premier sutra of Chogi order. It's considered the most important sutra that we study, and yet the Diamond Sutra is not easy to understand without a good teacher, because when we read the Diamond Sutra, it's fairly short and it's very esoteric, and it's very difficult to understand correctly without a good teacher. And so our Korean Choge order school calls itself Choge for not just by coincidence. There is a reason that it's called Choge order. That's because the mountain that the sixth patriarch, Huineng, lived on was Choge Mountain in China. And there is also a Choge Mountain in Korea at the mountain where Songgwangsa Temple is nowadays. But what's important is the Choge Mountain in China, because the sixth patriarch, he lived there, and he was the first patriarch, we say, of the Sun tradition to use the Diamond Sutra and to effectively teach the Diamond Sutra to all people, to common people. And he based his teaching of meditation on the Diamond Sutra. And he used the Diamond Sutra to give the Zen teaching to many people, to open the minds of many common people. And so we can say the roots of Korean Sun are not only in the Diamond Sutra, but also in the school of the sixth patriarch, in the school of Huineng. And so during this course, I would like to talk about the Sutra of Huineng, known in Korean as the 육조단경. And I can talk about it. Of course, we'll do this together. We talk about it in English, and we can discuss and we can ask questions about it. I am using a translation by the A.F. Price and Wang Mulam. This translation, this book, includes Diamond Sutra and Sutra of Huineng. So I hope by the next course we will have the books available for everybody. And I'm expecting a newer, even better translation soon of the sixth patriarch Sutra of Huineng. What is a sutra? So those of you who have studied Buddhism may already know this, but I will say it anyhow. The sutra is the written expression, the oral expression of the Buddha's Dharma. It's the recorded words of the Buddha. But is this actually the words of the Buddha? When the Buddha was alive, did they have tape recorder? Did they have video camera? Did they? No, of course not. Today we have video camera, we have tape recorder, we have all these things. But at the time of the Buddha, there was no tape recorder, there was no video camera. So what was written down, and we know as the sutras today, was actually not what the Buddha said. It's what his disciples remembered. It's what Ananda remembered. It's what his disciples later, after he died, what they wrote down. So after the Buddha's great nirvana, the Mahaparinirvana, then all the disciples gathered and they listened to Ananda. And so Ananda, he had a phenomenal memory. He had a very smart, he was very smart. He had a really great computer, so to say. He remembered everything the Buddha said. Over 40 years of teaching is like a super high-powered, computer with great hard drive capacity. And he remembered everything the Buddha said, and so every sutra begins with the words, "Thus have I heard." 4 words, "Thus have I heard." So sutra is actually Ananda's speech. It's what Ananda said, and it's what Ananda remembered. How the Buddha actually said it, we're not sure. Of course, we trust Ananda. He was a great monk. He had the phenomenal memory. And so probably what he remembered is very close to the way the Buddha said it. So we say the sutra is the Buddha's speech, as remembered by Ananda. Okay? Then precepts. All of you, maybe some of you took 5 precepts, maybe some of you took more, maybe some of you don't have precepts, but you are familiar with precepts. Precepts are very important, especially to monks, but also to all Buddhists. Precepts, we say, are the Buddha's action. This is how the Buddha would have behaved. It's how we expect somebody who is a Buddha to behave. Then, what is a Buddha's mind? The mind of the Buddha, we say, is the sun, or Japanese say the Zen, Chinese say Chan. Now, mind is a very kind of a ephemeral thing. It's not something we can say exactly what is the mind. Even psychologists have many arguments about what is the mind, and we cannot exactly define it. So, the same applies to sun. We cannot say sun is limited to this or that. It's a very wide word. It can apply to many things, but simply to express it, we can say it is the mind of the enlightened one, the mind of the Buddha. So the mind of the Buddha is sun, or meditation. Now meditation is a more kind of like, more like the word we use for yoga. Somebody sitting cross-legged and does yoga, or somebody does the various postures. This is a meditation. This is a little different than what we know as the Chan or the sun tradition. So the simplest way that I can tell you is sun is the mind of the Buddha, or the mind of the true nature, the true self. Okay. Now, this translation, as I mentioned, is done by this A.F. Price and Wang Mulan. This is printed by Shambhala, and it's actually a very good translation. There are other translations of Diamond Sutra and Six Patriarch Platform Sutra, but this one is one of the best that I have seen, and it's been recommended by other people. And the translator's mind is very important in these kind of texts, especially in the texts about Zen or Sun. Translator can make the text really great, or can make it very boring. It's really important. The attention of the translator and the wisdom of the translator is very important. It will show up into the book. So the translator has to have a lack of ego in translating. He has to be willing to accept criticism from others and work with others in order to make a good translation, and accept criticism and be willing to not put his ego into the translation. Just as the Diamond Sutra says, no bodhisattva who is a real bodhisattva, who is a true bodhisattva, cherishes the idea of an ego, a personality, a being, or a separated individuality. So any bodhisattva who is a true bodhisattva doesn't cherish that idea, I am bodhisattva. That's already not bodhisattva. This is a teaching of the Diamond Sutra. So the good translator or the good lecturer of this kind of material has to be without self-serving ego. Well, how do you translate and give the lecture if you don't have an ego? If there's nobody here, how am I talking to you? So don't get thrown off by the word no ego. It's common to read the Diamond Sutra and you hear there's no ego, there's no merit, there's no almost nothing at all. You can conclude there's nothing at all. But that's we say expedient means. This is a expedient means. We really need to have some experience of wisdom before we can correctly understand these words. Okay. Now, there's another interesting point that I would like to share with you. You notice that this sutra is called the Sutra of Wineng. Sutra of Wineng. Korean is a six-patriarch platform sutra, 육조단경. Okay, that's one thing that is very unique about this. It's the only sutra that has the designation of sutra in the Zen school, in the school of Sun. There are many books about Sun. There is a book of Huang Po. There is a book about Lin Chi's record. The record of Lin Chi, the record of Huang Po, the record of the Majo. But they are not called sutra. None of them are called sutra. And there is, even when you read the record of like a Bodhidharma, it's not called a sutra, okay? But this is called Sutra of the Huineng. It's unique in that it's the only work that is not in the outside of the Buddha speaking that bears the designation of sutra. So in that sense, we can say that sutra is a designation reserved for the sermons of Lord Buddha and those of great bodhisattvas. Either great bodhisattva or the Buddha usually speaks sutra. But in this case, it's not the Buddha, not just the bodhisattva, but it's the patriarch, we say, the master of the Zen school, the founder. Some people say the founder, but in some cases we cannot really say the founder because there was before the Bodhidharma and the second and third and fourth and fifth patriarch. But it's a testimonial to the unique influence of Huineng, that he had the sutra named after him. It's almost like a very kind of rare thing. And there are many great teachers and many great masters who have come and gone in Korean Buddhism, like my teacher just recently, who was mentioned when I was introduced, Master Sung San, who passed away 3 years into Nirvana. But it's very rare that somebody would write a sutra about him. It could be very controversial if somebody said, this is the Sutra of Sung San. It's almost like that because we have the Sutra of Huineng. So what actually does a sutra mean? A sutra, actually, the Indian word, as I understand, means like a strand, a string, a strand, kind of a line, a string. And in this sense, it's like a string of thought, some kind of thought that goes on, that's unbroken kind of chain. And in this sense, that's what's very unusual about this Sutra of Huineng. He's one of the very rare people who has the sutra written about him. We also know that, of course, there are other sutras that are not so good, but there are sutras about many different things in the world. Some are very low class, or some, not such great sutra. But this is, we can say, is actually one of the very fine pieces of literature in the world. It's very respected, and many people, especially in Western universities, are familiar and study this Sutra of Huineng. And it's considered, like we say, a Zen classic, Sun classic, By the way, if you have a question, I will allow some time at the end of the talk for questions. But if you have a really urgent question, it's like you cannot control yourself, you can put your hand up and ask as we go along. Okay? So another way of they describe this, the only sutra spoken by a native of China. And Chinese people are very proud, So the first part of this book, the first part of the Sutra of Huineng, I hope you have a copy in the library. You do? Huh? Okay, good. The first part is the autobiography. And this is the story of his life and how he first encountered the Dharma. And at that point in time, he was asked by many people assembled, many people in the local and in the government. It says here, there were assembled in the lecture hall the governor, Wei, government officials, Confucian scholars, about 30 each, government officials, 30 each, Confucian scholars, bhikkhus, bhikshunis, Taoists, and laymen, to the number of about 1,000. So it's, when it starts, it's almost like a Buddha, same as the Buddha. Over 1,000, about 1,000 people had assembled. And the first thing that Huineng says is, learned audience, our essence of mind, literally self-nature, which is the seed or kernel of enlightenment, is pure by nature, and by making use of this mind alone, we can reach Buddhahood directly. So he says, actually, really he gives you kind of a very quick summary of what his teaching is in the first sentence. And the word that he used, which we don't have a chilpan, a blackboard, right? Yeah. But the word which I think all of you understand is the essence of mind. Not just the mind. Many people have a mistaken notion that the mind is the way to attain Buddha. But if you check carefully, he says the essence of mind, which is the self-nature. Because we all have many different kinds of minds. With some of the mind we have is a very basic instinct. Like we have the instinct to eat, the instinct to sleep, the instinct to reproduce. We have the many different instinctive minds. He's not really talking about those. He's talking about the essence. He's talking about the most essential part of our mind. Of course, those are all important. We need the mind that says, oh, now you're tired, you need to go to sleep. Oh, now you're hungry, you need to eat. Oh, now you need to go out, make some money, you need to do this, do that. But he's talking about the essence of mind, the most essential. And he says if you make use of this, you can attain Buddhahood directly. You can become a Buddha directly. So this is this was actually at the time was quite revolutionary to many people in China. We have to understand that many people in China, when they read the sutras, the sutra books which came, they literally tried to practice as the sutra said, which means they went through a process of purification, a process of cultivation and realization, and many kinds of processes gradually cultivating themselves. But what the Huineng says is that if you can grab this essence of mind, then if you can make use of this, now the word is very important, make use of this, you can attain Buddhahood directly. So this is the same point as in Korean Buddhist teaching we say, see your nature, become Buddha. 견선 선불. See nature, become Buddha. Now, he talked about this as the essence of mind, which is the seed or kernel of enlightenment, Bodhi. Okay, so let's all look at this question. What is the essence of a mind? That's not our usual mind that is concerned with how much food we get to eat, concerned with how much money we make or how famous we are. These are the usual kind of mind. We are looking for the essence. It's kind of like the most essential and pure kind of seed of the mind. And by making use of this mind alone, we can reach Buddha directly. Now, he says, let me tell you something about my life and how I came into possession of the teachings of the Dhyana school. Dhyana is another word for Zen, the sun. Dhyana, jhana school. Jhana is Indian word. Jhana, Chinese is a chan. Korean is a sun. Japanese is Zen. Nowadays, English also Zen. So, Korean people are not happy when I say Zen. So I'm always reminding myself, don't say Zen. Don't say Zen. You'll make Korean people unhappy. You must say sun. So I try to say sun. When Huineng was very young, his father died, and his mother was left alone. His mother was left alone. She was miserable, and she had very little money, and she had a very difficult life. And Huineng, since a young child, he had to help his mother, and when he was just maybe teenage, he could not go to school. He had to go to the mountain, and he would gather wood. He would gather wood, and he would sell it in the market to help his mother. He was a very filial. He was a very good son, and he only took care of his mother. So he could not go to school like we had the opportunity, myself and other people had opportunity to go and study in the university. He didn't have that. He only went to the mountain and helped his mother. Every day he's gathering the firewood to help his mother. And he said he was maybe 16 or 17 years old. And he was returning from the mountain. He came to the marketplace, and he's selling the wood that he gathered at the marketplace. He gets some money, give to his mother. Only support his mother. Then it said that at that time, he heard a monk who was reciting the Diamond Sutra. And in those days, it was common for the monks to maybe even sit in the marketplace and to recite a sutra. And in that way, it was considered some kind of teaching, spreading the Buddhist teaching. And maybe that sometimes if you go if you go to Japan, in Korea, sometimes you don't see this anymore. But if you go to Japan, the monk will walk on the street and chanting Heart Sutra. Okay. And he heard this monk chant the Diamond Sutra, and when he heard the line, "Don't attach to anything which arises in the mind," when he heard that, he had some enlightening experience. His mind opened. Now, this is a really, actually, it's very incredible. He was not educated. He was not very old. He was not very experienced. But he heard the monk chanting. Actually, he was chanting in Chinese, and the words he was chanting were "ungmusoji isengishim, ungmusoji isengishim." And when he heard those words, which is don't attach to anything which arises in the mind, he had some awakening. It's like, oh, he understood something and he became enlightened. At that point, he did not do anything special, but he asked the monk, where did you learn this sutra, and who is your teacher? Who is teaching you to recite this Diamond Sutra? And the monk said, my teacher is the fifth patriarch, and he's staying at this temple in the mountain to the north, and he's teaching us to recite the Diamond Sutra. And the time the young Huineng was very interested in visiting the patriarch, the fifth patriarch, and he wanted to see whether his realization, whether his enlightenment was true. He wanted to have his enlightenment verified. We say confirmed, because one thing that I would like to emphasize in this course, many people have some experience where they think they got some enlightenment. They think that they have some awakening, they have some insight. But until they have it confirmed, until they meet a wise and good teacher, it's really of very little use.